Hey, sorry I had to turn back, but this is AI and me. My name is Patrick Onochi, and this is going to be a quick one. Hopefully, people are out there listening to this. So, the title of the stream is How to Make 5,000 to 20,000 a month in the healthcare industry. And I decided to make this quick one because, again, there's a myth that in terms of the healthcare industry, it's a growing industry. It's always going to be growing in the industry. Yeah, thank you. So the healthcare industry is growing and it's getting bigger. And one of the big part of healthcare industry is the profitability in the healthcare industry. And one of the areas I've been looking into is the tech area and the healthcare industry. But before I jump into how to basically make 5K to 10K or 20K a month in the healthcare industry, let's talk of what's currently in the healthcare industry. So the big players in terms of the amount of people who make money in the healthcare industry. Let's say starting with the business owners, and then we go into the medical doctors, who again, based on your specialty, you make a lot of money. And then we go into the nurses and all the nurses again, travel nurses. Those are the people who make real money in terms of the nurses. The other nurses make money, but not as much money as travel nurses. So, but again, all these big, high-paying medical fields also comes with its risk. Fatigue is one of the big risks, especially with the nurses. A lot of nurses experience fatigue, and a lot of doctors experience fatigue, and a lot of them also. There's a lot of nurses who are currently quitting right now, who are tired of basically doing nursing and all that, and they quit. But and then they're also getting into the field of healthcare. There are a lot of paths to get into the field of healthcare, but again, some require a specialization in college degree and all that. Some don't require a college degree, but again, it doesn't pay that much. But there's one path that people keep neglecting in terms of the healthcare field, and that's the tech. I know a lot of tech individuals who make 200, 300K in the tech field, and they are also working remote too. And they started when they were started in the tech field. They started with 120, 130, and moved up to 300K as they gain more skills. And they probably some of them have college degrees, some of them have degrees in music and psychology. Some of them started in nursing and decided, "Oh, I need to go into the tech side." So let's focus on that 5 to 20K a month. So one of the fields that's neglected to be talked about is healthcare analyst. That's a big field. Two fields especially: healthcare analyst and healthcare machine learning or data scientist. Those are the big field that basically pays huge amount of money. And you work remote too. So imagine a healthcare analyst. If you go to Indeed, I've seen a job healthcare analyst that pays 175K working remote, and you work for a hospital. So you're making almost the equivalent to a travel nurse, and you work remotely. So you're not in basically in the trenches with everybody else. Your goal at that point is taking their data and making sense of their data. See, the healthcare field is an expanding field right now. It's a field that continuously now requires a lot of data to be basically ran. And again, even with the recent pandemic, a lot of data was needed in order to understand how that was even being, how the whole crisis was basically going on and how to control it. And a lot of healthcare analysts were deployed at that point, understanding the data. Even they had problems. They had to even go into um, open source groups to try to give healthcare facilities, hospitals, even government facilities had to go into open source groups to get healthcare data analysts and data scientists just to understand their data. So the the big option is 5K to 20K in the healthcare field can be done with two career paths. Yeah, I tried a few. Yeah, but again, the healthcare role. But did you try in casual economist? Did you try the healthcare analyst and the healthcare data analyst and or data scientist role? Again, another one of the big misconceptions in all those roles are you need to understand all these technical stuff and all that. But the truth is, in a healthcare analyst role, there are certain things you need to understand. You need to understand the domain, the process. You need to understand certain tools, and you don't need to understand all the Python and all that. You just need to understand Excel. The beginning, just start with simple Excel, basic statistics, and basic PowerPoint. Start with that, and if you can start with that and understand those three easy, then you can be a healthcare analyst quickly with just those three tools: Excel, basic statistics. I mean, see, you only applied the two. You can. That's when I was applying. I was applying 15, 20 a day. So yeah, no. When I was applying, I was 15, 20 a day. So what I'll say is this: revamp your resume. Especially when doing interviews with a healthcare analyst, they don't really care about the degrees. They just care about what you're doing. How are you going to deal with their data? What insights do you get into their data? And again, understanding Excel, understanding PowerPoint, and understanding basic statistics, the basics. You don't need to know the whole enchilada of statistics, just the basics. You can become a good healthcare analyst. Then as you grow in the career, then you start adding tools like Tableau and the rest. But the standards first is just understand those three tools and understanding how to look at a process and decipher a process. Once you know how to do that, you can become a healthcare analyst and become really competent in your first week as a healthcare analyst. So what I'm saying is this: in order to become a good healthcare analyst, you don't need much. You just need to understand again Excel, basic statistics, and PowerPoint. Those three, and you're good to go. And once you understand all that, then the main focus of when you started the training as a healthcare analyst, the main focus is understand how to decipher a process. If you can look at any process and decipher it, you can then go from there. PowerPoint, if you know PowerPoint is easy to learn. Microsoft PowerPoint, that's easy. So this, but I'll say this: those three are the tools. But you need to the first thing you need to do. Those three are just tools. It's like a carpenter. A carpenter can use a hammer and all that, but in order for a carpenter to be good, he has to understand how that whole process works. So, how to decipher a process is a big aspect of it. So, if you go into the hospital and they give you a data set, you got to understand how that data works. So, you got to understand the process of the hospital, how patients are how patients come in, how patient is basically treated, who handles the patient. All that is a process. Knowing how that process works and knowing where that data came from that process gives you more insights on how that whole process, how to basically manipulate the whole system and how that data will tell you the story. So anytime a course is being taught, if they're not teaching you how to decipher a process, they're not giving you the real background on how to deal with data itself. Because anywhere I go, in any place, if in the cannabis industry, if it's in the healthcare industry, and the first thing you have to ask yourself is, what is the process? Where are they getting the data of the process? Let me give you a basic example of what I'm talking about. So in your day-to-day life. I want to know where you spend most of your money at. Do you just take your bank account statement and say, do you take your bank account statement without any identifying traits on the amount and just say, this is $5, $20, and this is all the money, but you don't know where that money is being spent. And what I'm talking about is your daily activities. You look at your daily activities and say, okay, in the morning or in the afternoon, I spend breakfast, and this is the amount I spend. That's a process. You're identifying the process and you're identifying the data associated with the process. And that's what a good analyst does. He looks at the process and looks at the data associated with the process and looks at what story comes out from there. And that's the key difference in terms of what people do, and they're not teaching. Everybody's teaching you the tools, but they're not teaching you how to go from a process to a story, and how that data is going to tell you how that data and that process are linked together to give you the whole insights. So that's the big key. Is every course nowadays is just teaching you the tools. Take this, use SQL, grab this number and do this and do some statistics, and that's it. But that's not how it works. In the real world, you have to understand the process and then go from there. So I'm going more in terms of how an analyst works, but what I'm saying is this. This is how valuable an analyst is. They look at your whole process and take that data to understand how your process works in detail and see where the bottlenecks are, see where the issues are, and see where you're losing money, losing patience, see where you're bleeding out in profit or bleeding out in efficiency. This is what a data analyst does. And that's why they give them a lot of money in terms of understanding how your process works. And the healthcare, if you can figure out, if a hospital comes in and says, hey, anytime we have an emergency, we're always turning patients away. We need that to stop. You as an analyst, can you then look at that process and look at that data to make recommendations on how to basically make it more effective where we don't need to be turning out patients? This is where your skill and your role will come into play. And this is how to teach how to do it. So if if you can give that hospital the way to say, okay, this is your process. This is where the data is. This is where your issues are. You don't have enough nurses to handle the amount of patients coming in, or you look at the population size and all that, and you tell the story. Look, you don't have when you have a huge emergency, and based on your historical records, you have emergency. You have 50 patients coming in. The amount of nurses you have on hand can't handle the amount of patients in there by law too. So if you can look at all these bottlenecks and say, okay, how can I solve these bottlenecks? Can I how ways to deal with it? And you bring that solution. Do you think you're not worth 5 to 20K at that point? You're worth more because you provided a solution utilizing the data. Now that's just a data analyst. They paid 150K just to look at the data, make insights, and make recommendations. Imagine what they give a data scientist or a data scientist consultant who comes in and makes predictions on how your whole system will be based on population of the whole county. For instance, in Ohio, do you know how much they pay a data scientist consultant who can make a prediction on what might happen in the next 10 years based on the casualty that happened in Ohio, the derailment, the train derailment? They'll give him 500K easy just to make that prediction assessment. Say in the next couple of months, and that's the problem. When you hire him, he's going to have to stay for a duration to monitor his assessment. So you're paying him as a consultant to stay in and monitor the assessment over time. So that's just a consultant. And again, you can be a consultant, you can be a data analyst, and you don't need so much specialized knowledge in terms of you don't need to be a mathematician of mathematicians. You just need to understand the domain, the process, which nobody's teaching, how that process flows. Let's look at the derailment itself. Look at Ohio derailment. If a hospital comes in and says, "Hey, I need a consultant that can come in, tell me, hey, we have this derailment. We need to know in the next 2 to 3 years, can we handle the capacity of individuals coming in based on that exposure in Ohio?" Or insurance company comes in and says, medical insurance company says, "Hey, based on we need your consulting expertise to know based on the exposure, how much do we think we're going to need to handle the incoming expenditures to pay off these individuals? And is there a way to mitigate this?" Based on what I'm seeing, it's now you have to understand the process. What variables affected are going to affect these people? So you start looking at the chemical exposure, looking at, okay, this is the exposure. Let's look at how the radius is going to basically expand based on the chemical components in there, based on the chemical components in terms of the spread rate, the concentration, all that, how the volatility of that compound, how it basically is going to spread. Is it is it is it basically in terms of when it's basically exposed in air, the diffusion? Again, I'm not going in detail in terms of chemistry, but based on that, then look at the population size. Then we have to classify based on that population size. Classify who are going to be affected most: the elderly, the young, the old. We then classify each of those groups, and then say how are they going to be affected most, and then draw a model to predict if, based on the population size and that was currently in that situation, people from the ages of 0 to 2 years old, this will be the effect of it, and could be long term. You could see more issues in terms of respiratory issues, in terms of asthma, long term effect. These are the most vulnerable. Then you start making predictions on how to mitigate that. Do you think they're not insurance companies are not going to pay you enough money to understand that knowledge? So you understood the process and now you understand how to mitigate this. This is the power of data. And this is the power of a good data analyst, data scientist, and a data scientist or data analyst consultant. And they will pay you very well just to understand how that process works. And this is not just for the medical industry, insurance industry, but this is for the hospitals. This is for big biopharma corporations when they need to understand, for instance, with the new with vaccines. Do you think they don't have data scientists, data analysts, and consultants looking at the vaccines, seeing the effects, and saying, are there mitigations or are there problems that might exist in the fall long, and how can we mitigate those issues? What are ways can we mitigate those issues? And they're using numbers to do this. So this is the power of data, and this is how it is. They pay data consultants, data analysts to understand what that data is talking about. They hire data analysts, pay them not a huge amount of money just to understand how that works. But what I'm seeing in terms of courses and all that is everybody's focusing on the tools. Nobody's focusing on, let's start with the process. Then I'll show you how the tools work with the process. Every interview I've gone, every job, consulting, everything I start with, it was when I go to a place, I never go in, bring your data, and then I analyze the data. No. Do you have a process map? Do you have a process system I can look into? How is the data collected? Where are the data collected? Where can I see how the data is collected? Let me validate that whole process to see if that data matches the process you have. When you do all that, then the data comes in to make sense. But nobody's teaching you that portion. And that's the most important portion of it. understanding where the data is coming from and validating where that data is coming from that process. And then making sense of that data itself using, again, statistics, visualization tools like Power BI, Tableau, or PowerPoint. Again, nobody cares what tool you use. They only care on how you convey that issue, convey that data, convey it based on their whole process and all that. So this is the thing. You want to make 5K to 20K a month. These are the two fields you need to go to: health analyst and a data scientist consultant. You can make in data scientist consulting, you can make a lot of money. But again, what people are not teaching you out there is how to look at the process, decipher a process, and how that relates to your data. If you understand that, I promise you, in any interview you go, you will excel at that interview. If you understand how to link their process and link their data, you will excel in an interview because every company has their process on their website. Every company has their process on their website. If they tell you, okay, how Google, if they give you a data set, you have to ask the process, where is your process, man? If you go to an interview, they say, hey, we're going to give you a data set. We want you to decipher the data. Your first question you should ask the person is, yes, you give him a data, but do you have a process, man? Do I have a process I can follow? Because you just giving me raw data, but I don't understand what your raw data is telling me. It's just raw data. Where did you get this data from? Explain how this data set is got. And if that interview looks at it, if that interview talks to you, at that point he already knows. He or she already knows that you know what you're doing. That is how even a data scientist cannot collect data. Can you can't give a data scientist just raw data and think he's gonna go, no. Everybody needs a process map. What you do on a daily basis is a process map. Imagine you going to your grocery store. How did you get the money to go to a grocery store? You went to a job. The job, you went for 30 hours a day, or you went for 40 hours a week. Then you collected a salary at the end. You collected a paycheck at the end of the month. Then you use your paycheck to go to the grocery store. That's a process map. That is a whole process map. Because at that point now you say, okay, where's the problem I have if I lose my money, or if my wages are gone? Then you say, if I make 20,000 and I lost maybe five. If I made 20,000 that month and I lost 5,000, you have a process map to track it. Because again, you went 40 hours a week. You said, okay, I went 40 hours a week. I made this amount of money, and during that period, I had taxes. I had this. So now you can track your process map. See when you went to grocery shopping. That's a whole process map, and that's what. And if you can, what do you think businesses do? This is how it works. And if you go to interview, this is what I'm giving you tricks that nobody's giving you. I'm giving you stuff that nobody's ever going to tell you in terms of data. Everybody's telling you the tools are the important thing. No, the tools are the less important stuff. The tools are the less. I've gone to Fortune 500 companies and I've gone to big companies. The tools are the least important stuff. The most important stuff is the impact. And in order to understand the impact, you have to understand the process. You don't understand the process, you don't understand how the impact works. If you go to a grocery store. Okay, let's look at let's look at one example and how important a health analyst is important. Let's look at uh, let's look at pharmacy. A pharmacy comes in and says, "Hey, today I'm losing revenue of. I'm supposed to be getting by the end of the month. The pharmacy. I'm supposed to get a revenue of 2.5 million. I'm getting a revenue of 2 million. I need to know where the 0.5 million is going, the 500,000 is going. Do you think just, okay, can I have all your data and then you can decipher it and say that's how? Nah, the first question you ask is, can I see where your process is? How your whole process works in terms of what you're selling, the inventory, everything. Can I see how it works? Where all the products is being purchased, where it's basically aggregated, and basically at the end, how do you get the final money itself, your final gross profit. So your goal is to basically look at the whole process in terms of where's the delivery coming. So if a pharmacy is selling drugs, what type of drugs are they selling? You got to look at all the inventory. Okay, they have all this inventory of all these drugs. Then you are, as an analyst, then has to look. Okay, where's this inventory coming from? The source. Where are the source from? Are there records that show how much each company is basically bringing into the pharmacy? How much product? You start looking at each of those. Okay, this they say they're bringing the 500 products, but I'm seeing only 400 products. You start deciphering it. So okay, this is where the source is coming from. Then okay, as it goes, then when the products come into the pharmacy, then what happens to that product after it stays in the pharmacy? Who comes in? Then you start looking at records on who purchases, what is purchases. Are you seeing things? Are you seeing things basically not matching up? Is there a lot of theft? So now you're telling a story because now you understand the process, and now you can put numbers around that process, and now you can tell the story to your customer. Okay, based on what I'm seeing first you losing money from this. They're not giving you the right product. Like for instance, this says they're giving you 500. They say they're giving you 500, but the real count says you having 400. Then here we see they say they have sales of 50, but we believe something is wrong here. Either there's a lot of theft inside the store or something. Then you start telling stories at that point because now you understand the process and you understand the numbers associated with the process. And that's how it works in terms of anything. Even making predictions as a data scientist is based on understanding the process and making predictions with those numbers. So if you're going for, as a health analyst, if you want to make 5 to 20K a month, this is the path. You don't need to be a specialized math whiz. All you need is three things: Excel, three tools. Tools again. Those are tools I'm talking about. Excel, basic statistics, and PowerPoint. But the most important thing you need to understand is how to decipher a process. If you know how to do that, Excel, everything comes in, makes it each much easier to tell that story. Understanding how to decipher a process, then those three tools will help you tell that story uniquely and make it simplify it for your client. And that's how a good health analyst or healthcare analyst or a good healthcare machine learning engineer can be. You don't need to learn all the stuff. I know individuals with a music degree go into healthcare data analyst making 350K, then go into consulting making 500 and 600K because they understand how a process works, how to decipher a process, and how to tell a story about that process with those three tools. Those three tools, they go inside a meeting and say, this is what's going on with your process. This is where the issues are. This is where the bottlenecks are. If you do this, do this, do this, you can increase your efficiency by 20%, increase your profit margin by 10%, just by understanding the process and understanding how those three tools, Excel, basic statistics, and PowerPoint, can tell a whole story. And they make 350 to 500,000 just understanding those simple stuff. But again, everybody's telling you to learn everything. SQL, Python. I know all that, but it doesn't, in most of my jobs, they don't care. They just care, what can those numbers tell me? And can you present it in such a way I can implement it? Because again, how do you implement a solution when you don't understand the process? In order to implement the solution, you need to understand how the process works and how your data can be implemented, your solution can be implemented. So if you go into a course or anything, the first lesson anybody should teach you, if I'm going to start, is first understanding how a process works and understanding how that data comes into that process. Again, people make 500K to 600K with three tools: Excel, basic statistics, and PowerPoint. That's it. And they understand how a process works. The key part, how a process works. Anybody's telling you need to know all these stuff, they've not done this in the real world. No CEO wants to be confused with all that jargons and all that. Oh, I did analysis and regression analysis and I did this. And no, my CEO says, what is the data telling me? Where are the bottlenecks? Where are the deficiency? How can I increase my value? No CEO wants to know how you use SQL. No CEO wants to know how you utilize Tableau or Python. They don't give a shit. Really, they don't. What they want to know is where's my bottleneck, where are my problems, and how can I solve it? And if you can present it as simple as in PowerPoint with less jargons and say, hey, this is where your problem is, this is where the issue is, this is how I know this is where your issue is. And if you do this and I continue monitoring for you, you can see an increase in your revenue. And again, they just do this simple and basically use Microsoft Word, presented a package and said, this is where your issues are. Did a presentation, they cut them a check of 20K or 30K, and they're on their way. A consultant came in, said, hey, this is where your issue. I said, look, came in for 2-3 weeks, look at this, did a presentation, did all that, a month's work, they give them 30 to 50K, cut them a check and said, that's it. Thank you. I'll see you next. I'll see you in 3 months if the problem persists. That's it. Did a quick 1 hour presentation on PowerPoint. Cut them a 50K check. Thank you. I'll see you in 2-3 months if this problem still persists. But this is where your problem is. This is where the bottlenecks is. Thank you. Cut my check. I'm out. And you're telling me you can't do this? And the person had a music degree. He just understood how numbers work. Basic statistics. He didn't need to know regression. He just need to know, hey, mean, median, mode, range, maybe a quick standard deviation. That's it. But yet, we're trying again, healthcare. This is healthcare analyst, healthcare data scientist. So it's not. It's really not rocket science in terms of making 5 to 20K a month, even more if you want. You just need to understand those three tools and how a process works. That's how it works. Three tools and a process. And if anybody wants to challenge me, I promise you, there's nothing you can do. Those three tools and a process, and I'll tell you how everything works with just those three tools. It's not that difficult. And if you go to interviews, if you go advertise as a health analyst, again, those three tools and how a process works. A hospital comes in an interview, say, hey, we want a healthcare analyst. On your first day of the job, what are you gonna do? This is my always question. Not the first day, but the first 2 weeks of my job, the goal is to understand the process. I'm going to talk to every individual around there that's physically in there to understand how that process works. and I'm going to draw it out. If I'm going to draw it on a whiteboard, I'm going to draw how all that process works to a T. That's will be my first 2 weeks of my job, understanding how everything works and draw it out. Every interview I've gone to, they ask me, when you get this job, what are you going to start? How are you going to identify the problems? So my first week is understanding how your process works. I'm going to go to each individual assigned to that process and understand what each that process is and understand where the bottlenecks are. Because each you talk to them, they give you the solutions. The next step, I'm going to go to the data set and validate that that data is actually representative of what the process is doing. If you say this process is used to collect all your drugs, does the data show that that process is basically the source of your drugs or the source of your patients? That's the first step. The next step is now you've learned the process, you validated the data. Now you need to understand where the bottlenecks is. And nobody's teaching you. There's a cycle. I have a cycle process that I normally teach. I taught a couple of students on how this works. A revolutionary cycle that always, if you understand this cycle, you basically understand every part of data analyst. And it's just that cycle is always going to be persistent dealing with data. But I'm not trying to go in depth in terms of understanding data, how data works in terms of. But I'm telling you, if you want to be a good health analyst, you don't need. If you want to be a good consultant, you don't need all that hoopla. You don't need all the Tableau, SQL, everything. I need to know. You don't need all that. Those are hoopla. Understand the process. Understand those three tools, and you're good to go. And when any interview comes in, any interview, you can tell an interviewer, hey, what is your process map? Do you have a process map? Do you have how this? If you do you know where your bottlenecks are? Do you know where your issues are? Is it an ever-growing issue? Why haven't you solved that issue if you know where the bottleneck is? Because most companies, they do know their process map, but most companies always make improvements. See, when companies make your goal of you as a data analyst is always continuous improvement. Because companies will always create projects to improve their whole process. Your goal is to understand project, how that new project is affecting the whole process itself. That's what nobody tells you that. What a data analyst and health data scientist, everybody is this. Every company has a project trying to improve their whole process. How can we make this process make more money? Your job at that point is making sure that whole new project is not affecting everybody else. That new project is not turning into a bottleneck. Your goal is to assess that. Look at that data saying, how is that new project affecting this process we're having? Is it bringing our efficiency down? How is it going to basically come into the whole process? Your goal is to map it out and use data to tell that story. Hey, you have this project, it's good, but I don't think in the long run it's going to be profitable. Why? This is why it's affecting this in the downstream, or it's affecting this upstream. It's affecting our clients here. Your goal is to tell that story. But again, you have to understand the process in order to understand how data affects it. But again, nobody's teaching this. What they're teaching you is tools, SQL, learn Python, learn this. But I tell you, 90%, 99% of the time, nobody cares on what tools you're using. They care on how impactful your insights are. And how impactful your insights are comes from understanding how the process works. It took me years to learn how to decipher a process. I can go and learn the process, go in there immediately and go, this is where it is. Okay, this. Okay. I know how to group a process. A process is always going to be the same. A process is always going to be the same. Every process, from how Chick-fil-A works to how a hospital works, it's always going to be the same. There's always a waste at the end. I'm going to give you a preview. There's always an input, a production. There's something they're producing. There's something. So it's Chick-fil-A. They're bringing chickens. They're bringing customers. The hospital, again, you're bringing customers to do a service. You're treating them based on medical issues. Input, input. And I'm going to give you, there's always going to be a waste. Input, input, waste. So the goal is in all that process, what are you going to be controlling? Can you control, again, you can control waste, you can control input, you can control inside the process, you can make improvements. As a data analyst, your goal is to say, okay, where are the problems, where the issues are? It's in the waste, it's in the input, it's in the middle. Again, I'm giving you, I'm just giving you the insights, but as a data analyst, you should know all this, how to go into a place and say, this is how to decipher this place. And if you don't know now, every process is the same. There's nothing you can, I can go in any process you can mention, I can tell you how it works. Because every process is the same. Every business is this almost the same. It's repeatable. There's always a waste at the end. There was input in the beginning. Because again, the goal of any business is to make money. But there's always an input. Chick-fil-A input, they're making sandwiches. There's an input side, customers and all that. There's also a safety side. Even every business has a safety side. You know, again, Chick-fil-A safety, not only customer safety. You have to look at customer safety. You have to look at kitchen safety. You have to look at food safety. Then if you look at hospital, you have to look at the safety here too. The safety in the hospitals, the cleanliness, tool safety, environmental safety. Again, I told you every process has the same scenario. There's a safety process, there's a safety angle in there. Do you know as a data analyst, you have to look at the safety side too? Because again, you're paying money for the safety. How efficient is that? So when everybody's teaching you, they're teaching you, giving you the basic knowledge. They're giving you the knowledge that probably get you in for an interview. But they're not teaching you the knowledge that get you the job, that get you a consulting gig. They're teaching you the basics. So in order for you to be a good healthcare analyst, you just need three tools and understanding how a process works. That is the key. The key is not learning Tableau, learning all this. Nah. I know statistics, I know everything, but what helped me the most is going there and saying, look, what's the objective? Define the objective, define a process map, and let's see how you validate if your process map is truly a representation of what your data is. If it is, now we can work on what the problem is. If it's not, we need to go back. We need to go back to the drawing and then start collecting data to represent what your process is actually saying. That is not being taught. What is being taught is learn a tool, and people pay 5, 10K for that. I'm like, y'all paying 5K to 10K, and they teaching you what? Basic statistics and all that, but they're not teaching you how that works first. And again, to teach that part, it's not that difficult to teach you the process, how to look at the process. I teach it based on your life itself. Once you start looking at it as the way I look at it, then you start looking at everything the way I see it. Everything has a process, everything has a flow. And knowing, okay, this is how it works. And then knowing, okay, for instance, if let's look at the most, let's look at, for instance, dating. Let's look at dating, how dating works. It's a process flow. There's a process to it. You go, you have to meet mutual, you have to meet, you define your characteristics and the characteristics of the person you want to meet, all right? So that's the process, that definition. Then you start looking. Where are you looking at? That's a process again. Am I looking at bookstores? Am I looking at places? And now those places match the characteristics I want to go. See, that's a process. Because now you're looking at, that's a data set. You're looking at the places you're looking at, and does it match the characteristics of women I want to go meet? That's a data set. I'm looking daily life. This is how it works. So if it's not meaning it, then I need to change that process. If I'm going to all these places, if it's not, then where area does it can I go that will match the characteristics I'm looking into? That's a data set you collect. Okay, now you find where the places where you meet these women you want to date. Okay, now I found that that's a process. So I know the women with the same characters I wouldn't normally hang out in the libraries, not hang out in and art galleries, hang out on this. Okay, that's now I know that process map is basically nailed in. Okay, the next step, dating and all that. So that's what it goes from. But again, I've done all this stream, but I'm about to go. I'll see you in the next one. All right, peace.